All right, we might get started as more people join us. I'm sure that they can catch up as we go along. There'll be a recording of either this session or the session that we ran on Tuesday available for you to catch up on any elements that you missed. If you have to leave today, we're really excited to be able to meet with you today. My name's Reid Smith. I'm the co-CEO of Ochre Education, and I'm so proud to be presenting on behalf of us and the National Catholic Education Commission about the resources that we have freely available to support teachers like yourselves, as well as the students that are in your care. We're really keen to talk about that today. I'm going to start, though, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all join today, which for me is the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island people who are present today. So in today's session, we're trying to achieve a number of different aims. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what this project is and what it is aiming to achieve and what supports we're trying to provide to teachers and schools. We'll provide an overview of the resources, so all of the different things that are available for you to use and adapt for your classroom and your context. And then we'll spend a little bit of time at the end discussing how you might use and adapt the resources in your context. And as we go along, please feel free to ask questions through our chat function, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end of our session to take some questions from you. Before I go any further, I'd like to welcome Anna Howarth from the Catholic Education Commission, who would like to give an introduction to this wonderful project together, how it came about and what we're trying to achieve. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Reid, and hello everyone on the call. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really pleased to be here, really pleased to be partnering with Ochre Education on this project. A key part of the strategy for the National Catholic Education Commission is really around supporting the continual improvement of educational outcomes for all Australians. And the Mastery Mathematics project is really a key part of how we're bringing this to life. And this initiative was developed to build on the great work that Catholic Education Canberra Goulburn and the Melbourne Archdiocese of Catholic Schools have already commenced with Ochre. And if you go onto the Ochre website, you'll see a lot of primary curriculum resources that they have developed there. And so we're really extending on that really fantastic work that's been done to date. Through this project, Mastery Mathematics, we're hoping to save teachers time and ease the pressure in finding and creating teaching and learning resources that embed evidence-based practices. At the same time, these resources are really helping to improve student outcomes by providing consistency of instruction to support excellence and equity. So whether it's for early career teachers or teachers teaching out of field, or maybe highly experienced teachers who are adapting to new curriculum or syllabus, we know that each of you are going to take these resources and adapt them and adopt them as appropriate within your own classrooms. And we're really excited to see how that comes to life for each of you. We've commenced this project as a pilot. We had a small number of dioceses across Catholic education, including Melbourne Archdiocese Catholic schools in Victoria. We've got all of South Australia, Canberra, Goulburn and Parramatta dioceses, who are all part of our pilot. And teachers from these pilot dioceses have been engaged to create the lessons to support their colleagues right across Australia. So Ochre has been overseeing the development of the lessons and provides frameworks and mentorships to those teacher creators to develop those resources aligned to evidence-based practices, prioritising critical knowledge and building student understanding. The resources, as you know, are rolling out on a termly basis. So we've got term 1 that's up already. It was launched on the 31st of January, and those resources are available right now, mapped to the Australian curriculum version 9.0 and the Victorian curriculum version 2.0. We're currently working on mapping to the New South Wales syllabus, and as soon as those resources are ready, we will load those onto the Ochre website also. There's ultimately going to be around 240 lessons mapped to each curricula and syllabus. That's a full year's worth of content, lesson content for years 7 and 8, with additional resources to support intervention for students who have gaps in foundational numeracy skills. So while Term 1 materials are available now, other materials are going to be made available over the course of the year. We are really pleased to be partnering with Ochre, and I'm personally really pleased for that partnership that we've got with Reid and Caroline and the team. They've just been doing incredible work in developing these resources. So I am very pleased to hand back now to you, Reid, to take us through for the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. We're really proud to be part of this project and particularly proud to be presenting the work of such fantastic teachers from each of the participating dioceses to you today. So I thought it would be worth just talking a little bit about how the curriculum materials were developed. So really, these initial lessons that have been released for your use, mapped to the Victorian Curriculum 2.0, the Australian Curriculum version 9. It's been a collaborative effort between the Ochre curriculum team and also a maths expert group that has been assembled from each of the different pilot dioceses. And I'm really proud to be able to say that we've got, I think, Ainsley and Nancy from Melbourne Archdiocese Catholic Schools are joining us today, and their wisdom and experience, along with the expertise of everybody else on that panel, has been so invaluable. So that group has been working together to refine the design not only of the overall coherent and considered curriculum, but also the lesson level materials that we're going to be looking at today. And one of the key features of the lesson and curriculum materials is it's actually developed by teachers. So practicing teachers in each of these schools in the pilot diocese have come together to create fantastic resources that are available free for every other school and teacher to use. So it really started with our groups getting together, the participating teachers and Ochre Education. We had some induction and professional learning to start off with to get a common sense of what the lessons might look like and how we were going to mesh all of our ideas and experience together. We collaborated and shared the expertise, the vast expertise that sat across all of the people that participated in that Term 1 aspect of the project. And then we began to create some actual lessons. So this has been a collaborative effort from the very first design of the curriculum elements all the way through to the lesson materials. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to share each of those components that are available to you. But I think one of the things to really highlight here as we go through these materials is that the use of these resources, first of all, it's entirely optional. So these resources for all of the schools, whether they be in the pilot diocese or in the government or independent sector, it's entirely optional. So you can use parts of them, all of them. You can take the bits that you like. They're entirely optional and they're entirely free for anyone who wishes to use them. There's no compulsion to use the materials that have been made available through this project. And the second thing, and this was a really important element of this project and highlighted continuously through conversations between Ochre and the expert group, is the role that adaptability plays. That we know that schools and teachers operate in very different contexts with different students, and the materials that were produced as part of this project needed to be as adaptable as possible, making sure too that they make reference obviously to the relevant curriculum or syllabus. So as we go along, I'll be pointing out the adaptability of those particular materials, what you can change and alter, and the ways in which we've tried to build in some of this adaptability to the way that things are structured while still maintaining a conceptually rigorous and coherent curriculum. So I'm going to start by talking about the curriculum planning resources. So this is a general class of materials that are looking at how ideas, concepts, skills, and knowledge are sequenced over the course of a unit and over a year. And really, they've broken down into a couple of different levels. And I'm going to quickly describe each of the levels before taking a little bit more time to examine them in depth. So the highest level detail is the yearly overview, which gives a suggested sequence of units and concepts over the course of the year and some suggested timings for how long those particular units might last for over a course of weeks. Then you have the unit overview. The purpose of the unit overview as the name suggests, is just to give a little bit of an indication about what each of those units is trying to achieve, what the lesson resources and materials are trying to support teachers in helping their students develop. Gives an indication of the term that it could sit in, the strands in the curriculum or the syllabus that it's attached to, and also the number of lessons that we anticipate being part of that unit. The next level down is the scope and sequence, which is where we break down each individual unit into individual lessons. So what are the sequence of lessons and the learning intentions that comprise the unit? It also contains some additional details that then move down into the unit plans. The unit plans, if you like, are a collection of what we call lesson detail, which is essentially a short lesson plan, as well as some teacher guidance that would accompany the lesson level materials. And then finally, we have this thing called the precedence diagram, which is a diagram that's trying to help schools balance the need for resources that are adaptable, but also acknowledging that there are concepts and ideas that build on one another over time. And so giving some advice to schools about how they might arrange their scope and sequences and curriculum to best serve the students in their care. So if we start with the yearly overview, this is an example of the yearly overview. Many of you will have similar kinds of setups in your particular school. This is an example from the Australian curriculum, but we have also got an adapted version for the Victorian curriculum. Throughout the presentation tonight, I'll be using Australian curriculum materials, but don't fear, Victorian teachers, you can head into the Victorian side of our site to pick up your versions of these curriculum materials. So you'll see that each of the terms blocked out into 9-week terms, and then we've given an indication of a suggested order of units and concepts and how long they could potentially take. Now, we know that the term lengths differ from state to state and year to year. Term 1 is a fantastic example, looking at the difference between, say, Queensland, Victoria, and New South Wales in term 1. And we also know that schools run different numbers of lessons for different amounts of time, and also have other camps and other aspects of their school program that sit in different terms. So we've essentially programmed 9 weeks with 3 60-minute lessons for each of those weeks. So each term contains around about 27 lessons worth of materials, and then any assessment lessons would sit on top of that. So the yearly overview really is your at-a-glance view of how the curriculum is suggested to be set out. But as I'll continue to emphasise over the course of the presentation today, that's entirely adaptable for your needs and the needs of your students. The next level down really is the unit overview. So here is a unit overview. It lists each of the units. So here you can see the first 3 units of the Australian curriculum, which is the integer unit, square and cube numbers, and fractions. We have a series of unit objectives that describe what it is that we're hoping that students will know, understand, and be able to do as a result of the teaching these lessons, the term that we've notionally allocated those units, and then the number of lessons that are allocated. So really we're trying to get more and more detail as we move from the upper level of the documents, the yearly map, through to more fine-grained examination of what's on offer. The next level down is the scope and sequence chart. So the scope and sequence document takes a unit and it breaks it down into the component lessons. So here's an example, the first unit of year 7, the integers unit. We've got a reminder at the top about the unit objectives. You'll notice in this first table in the third column, prerequisite units and succeeding units. What we're trying to do there is to give an indication of whether there are concepts, knowledges, or skills that are covered in other units that we've developed as part of this program that we think would be valuable for students to know and be able to do as if you were going to attempt using this particular unit. As this is the first unit of year 7, there are no prerequisite units, but then there's a unit that actually builds on some of these ideas about integers. The unit 7NO2A is that unit. So it just gives you a bit of an idea about some of the dependencies that exist within the curriculum, keeping in mind that you can move things around and choose. So the scope and sequence here just gives us an overview for each of the lesson title, the learning intention, and then also any curriculum or syllabus codes that are applicable to that particular lesson. The unit plan is the next level of documentation. And the unit plan is interesting because it's divided into two sections. The top section we call lesson detail. I've got an example of two lesson details here, and essentially it's like a mini lesson plan. It's a description of what's happening in the lesson, where it sits in a sequence, and then the kinds of knowledge, skills, and understandings that are being addressed in each of those lessons. And I'll just take a moment to identify some key aspects of that lesson detail there. So really, we've got a lesson title, which is usually a shorter version of the learning intention. We've got where this lesson might appear in our suggested sequence so that teachers can locate it, because some schools are using the lessons as written. We have the Australian curriculum codes. We would have, of course, the Victorian curriculum codes for that documentation. The learning intention, what is it that we're trying to achieve in this lesson? We have incidental vocabulary. So we've tried to identify some of the key terms that come up in the lesson that students may have been exposed to before, and that you may need to think about whether your students have worked with it in the past. And then we've got this section that's the key vocabulary. And the key vocabulary are new ideas or really focused words that are being used in this unit. Often we've provided some vocabulary slides that address each of this key vocabulary, and really to signal to the teacher that be aware these are keywords for this particular unit, and we're going to be using it, relying quite heavily in this lesson. Of course, we've got equipment required, just a heads up for those things that are required for this lesson. And our lesson structure often involves activating prior learning, so just some rehearsal and practice for foundational skills that are going to be built upon over the course of the lesson. We have a brief description of the lesson content, what it is that students will be and teachers will be doing over the course of the lesson, and then some suggested practice activities. So you'll find in the lesson level resources, some of the activities in the practice tasks section will be built out into the booklet and into the lesson slides, and others are there for suggestions for teachers who are looking for other ways that they can help their students engage with these key ideas and understandings of mathematics. So after each of those lesson details, those lesson plans, at the end of the unit plan, we have a set of additional teacher guidance. So the additional teacher guidance, we have the equipment requirements for the entire unit. For this unit, it doesn't require too much, but for units that rely heavily on manipulatives, it's got a list of all of the things that you would ideally have access to teach the lessons in this unit as intended. We have a little bit of information about the unit and where it sits in relation to other units in the sequence, and what a brief statement of what it is that we're trying to achieve. The teaching notes provides some explanation of some of the teaching techniques and the strategies that have been built into the lessons in this unit. And it's a really good place to start with if you're planning to use a unit. It's to go to the teaching notes and just read through, because sometimes it has some strategies that you may not have encountered before, or it's got some hints and tips and tricks for you as both an experienced teacher or as a teacher new to mathematics that might be really useful. And finally, a section on possible student misconceptions, things that students have typically found difficult, or some misconceptions that they might hold that it would be wise for you to be aware of, so that you can try and identify that during your checking for understanding during the lesson. So those two elements, the lesson detail and the teacher guidance, makes up the unit plan. The last part of this overall sequencing is the precedence diagram. Now, as I said before, one of the challenges of this particular curriculum is we want to have a curriculum that is coherent and builds over time, where we've got lessons that integrate different concepts from different parts of the syllabus or curriculum. However, we're trying to keep this adaptability and flexibility in mind. And so the precedence diagram is one way that we're trying to keep both of those sometimes competing ideas in balance. So the precedence diagram, I've got the Year 7 and Year 8 version here, is trying to show out diagrammatically the dependencies that exist between units. And I'm going to focus in on the Year 7 version just now. So if we have a look at the algebra column, so that's the second column that's in green, you'll see two units, 7A and 7A2A. Now, they're positioned halfway down this precedence diagram, and what that's indicating is they should be taught after some of the concepts have been covered in the number units. So those number units in column 1, that in that long box that has 4 unit codes in it, there are ideas and concepts that sit within those particular units that we are going to utilise and mobilise in the algebra unit. So concepts about percentages and ratios and rates, some of the index laws, so square and cube numbers, some of those different ideas we're going to be reusing and re-encountering in the algebra unit. So it's important to know that we have to consider some of those learnings from the number unit. So you can see that there are some strong dependencies for some of these units on other units in the sequence, whereas others it's less dependent. So the statistics unit that we've got at the start of the year, they are less dependent on some of these ideas around numbers and ways of manipulating number, and some are heavily dependent. So there's some of that work in probability. We really need to have a strong sense of number and algebra to do a number of those units. So the precedence diagram is taking that idea of preceding and succeeding units and trying to show that visually for you and your school as you're thinking about how curriculum might be structured and scheduled. So those materials that I've just worked through there, the yearly overview, the unit overview, the scope and sequence, unit plans, and the precedence diagram, they form that curriculum mapping of the curriculum level of materials that are available for you. And the vast majority of those provided in an editable form for you to adjust to your needs. As part of this project, we're also proud to be able to provide some lesson resources, things that you can use in your classroom to support your teaching and learning. So the types of lesson resources that the teachers have created as part of this project, we have some lesson slides that you can choose to use as is or just sections of those slides. We have some booklets that contain key questions and key ideas and tasks for students to engage with the concepts. We have what we call reteach slides, which are essentially mini lessons that you can use at any point in the year if you feel that your students just need a little bit of a refresher. If there are ideas or concepts that you think that we need a little bit more rehearsal for. There's some daily review materials, which are a short 5 to 10 minute activity at the start of each lesson to review concepts and ideas that have been previously taught, so providing opportunities for retrieval practice over time. And then finally, we have some sample assessments that you can use as is or use as inspiration for assessments in your classes. Again, just emphasising before I talk a little bit about each of these elements of the lesson resources, everything that's provided as part of this project is entirely optional for you to use or not use as you and your peers see fit. And virtually all of it's adaptable. So you can take sections of it, you can take chunks, you can use the whole set together or just use parts of the materials. You can edit the slides themselves. They are as adaptable as we could possibly make it, knowing that teachers are very good at knowing their students and can make the adjustments that are required for their classes. So if we start with the lesson slides, each of the lessons in our sequence has some lesson slides that are attached to it. And so they are largish slide decks that have a variety of slides, some of which are there for teacher information, some of which are there intended to be shown to the students. And we've tried to overplan to some degree in these decks. So you will find that we've given additional examples in places. So if you're planning to use one of the slide decks, it's well worth your time to run through the materials as part of your preparation, thinking about the students that are in your class, what aspects will they need more or less practice on, which bits can you take almost as read and move on, and so change the slides that are available for your students. At the start of the decks, we provide some information for the teacher. So first of all, we've got what's called the agenda slide, which is just a very quick description of how the lesson flows. So in this particular case, we have the learning intentions, some keywords and activate prior learning that I'll discuss in a moment. And then we have these blue lines, which are essentially the instructional cycles. The lessons are based on an explicit instruction methodology, so things tend to come in these short instructional cycles that I'll detail a bit later. And we're just giving an indication of how many of those might exist within the lesson. Over the course of the lesson, we provide a variety of different tasks and activities for students to engage in, and we are attempting to identify the difficulty of those tasks using difficulty gauges. So green gauges are associated with activities that we think are very much at year level, that the vast majority of students should be able to engage with really well, through to more difficult tasks like the red gauges, which are extension tasks or very open-ended tasks that provide an opportunity for those students who have stronger achievement in this particular area to be able to show what it is that they're able to do and extend their thinking. We also have the learning intention slide that some teachers choose to show their students. Others teachers might co-create some of the learning intentions or hide it completely. It's just there as information for you as a teacher to use as you see fit, as well as a slide that details the equipment that's required for a particular lesson. We also have some information slides. So one of them is the key principles slide. On each of the slides that's associated with the lesson, you'll find some indicators in the corner that just gives a little bit of a hint to you as a teacher about what the purpose of this particular activity or slide is. So for example, if there's a C in the corner, it's a slide really that's trying to develop some sort of a concept. It's usually where a teacher is explaining a concept, might be using the slide, or might be using some physical materials and a webcam. There are different ways to be able to use that concept development, but we have these indicators on the slide decks that give some advice about how that particular slide may be used. And we've got some engagement icons as well. So the engagement icons you'll find sitting next to the key principles elements, and they just give, again, suggestions for ways that students might engage with the concepts, whether you might ask for a whiteboard response, whether they need a calculator, whether we suggest you use some concrete materials, whether it's a pair share. It's just some advice for you as a teacher to use or ignore, because you know best in your particular classrooms. In each of the lessons, we have a series of keywords. Now, the keyword slides are all gathered together at the start of the lesson purely so that you know where they are. We don't intend in the lessons for you as a teacher to start your lesson and then go through each of the keywords one by one and have the students write them in their booklet. That's not how we intend them to be used. They are placed there for you to use as you see fit. So if you feel that you need an explainer for a particular keyword and it needs to be in a certain place in the slide deck, then you can move it to where you need it to be. If you don't need to or want to use the keywords, you can delete or hide them. It's up to you. The keywords are simply there in a particular position in the lesson, just simply so that you can go back and find them easily if you need to, even in the middle of a lesson. If you need to pull something through the deck, it's easy to find in the lesson structure. So when you look at the main lesson, all of those keywords sit together. As I mentioned before, we usually have some activating prior learning, a series of ideas and activities that students can quickly engage in. It's meant to be just rapid retrieval of ideas, some mathematical fluency, usually just some things that we want them to be aware of. Gives us an opportunity as teachers just to quickly check whether things that we think our students know and can do, they've actually mastered, and whether we just need to do a little bit of reteaching before we get started. So you'll find that at the start in Activate Prior Learning section. And so you'll find that that's quite short, and often the keywords from one lesson will be used in activating prior knowledge in lesson 2, right? So there's some continuity from one lesson to the next where we're trying to build over time. The main lesson usually has these short instructional cycles. So this is an example of one that runs for 6 slides or 5 slides in this particular case, where we're trying to develop a particular key concept or skill. And what we've tried to do is to demarcate these instructional cycles using blue slides. And the reason for that is we know that schools and teachers will chop up the slides. So even though we've got the some of these key ideas, the teaching that's arranged in such a way that they fit in a lesson, we know teachers are supplementing the slides with their own activities and resources that they found have worked well in their cases, or they're chopping parts out, and it just makes it easier for you to find if we've got them demarcated in the lesson. So you'll find that the lessons are broken up into these small instructional cycles where students have the opportunity to practice skills with you, and then we've also got some suggestions about the kinds of things that students might do to help practice the concept or skill that they've just been learning. At the end of the lesson, we have a lesson review and also some additional teacher guidance notes. Just here are some key teaching points that sometimes people might miss, maybe some key questions that you could ask at key points. Sometimes there are enabling and extending prompts that sit within the teacher guidance. So check there when you're planning for your lesson for key ideas that you might keep in mind if you're intending to use those lessons. Alongside the lessons for each unit, there's one booklet. So the booklet, there's one per unit, and it contains a series of options for you to choose from. So there are a collection of a whole heap of different learning activities, some of them really working on mathematical fluency and procedural fluency through to problem solving and non-routine problems. And they are in a suggested sequence, but they can be moved wherever you like. So we know some schools are taking some of those non-routine problems and using them to start lessons. We know that some schools are deciding to use or not use some elements of the booklets. Some people are just using the booklets. There's just a whole different way that you can use the materials in those booklets. And again, they're editable. So you can take a copy for yourself and change them for your students. We do assume that students have access to a textbook. So there are fewer practice questions on things that are quite procedural than perhaps you'd find in a textbook, just because we feel that often schools have already committed to textbooks, and so what they don't need are more procedural questions, but rather some more non-routine questions. So we've prioritised those non-routine problems. The booklets provide further practice and also some practical tasks. So there are times when kids will be engaged in investigations, statistical modelling, as it's called for in a variety of the curriculum and the syllabus. So there are instructions for students to be able to engage in some of those tasks. We also have a booklet glossary. So at the start of the booklet, we've filled in each of the keywords and their definitions that we use, and we've left some space for students to work with and add in examples and non-examples, because it's a way of students being able to tease out some of those ideas. Again, you can choose to use it or not use it, however you see fit. We've also got some unit reflections at the end of each of the unit booklets. We've just got a page that is really giving the opportunity for students to reflect on their learning over the course of the unit. We know some schools are using as intended, which is reflecting on a unit as a whole, and others are using them at strategic points during a unit to just help the students reflect on their learning so far, and sometimes even taking them up just as a teacher to get a quick feel for what's working or not working, where students feel they require a little bit more support. In amongst these lessons that contain the cycles that we've just been talking about are rich task lessons. So we've added in these rich task lessons that are extended non-routine problem solving and investigation lessons. They can be used at a variety of stages in the lesson progression. We've put them in particular phases in the sequence where we think that they'd work really well, but they can be moved wherever you like to suit your particular needs. And most of those rich tasks are actually broken up into smaller tasks, smaller elements. And we know that some teachers are actually breaking those rich tasks, instead of setting them as a full lesson or 2 lessons, they are breaking them into, say, 4 or 5 components, and then using a component a lesson over the course of a couple of weeks as they are helping students work with and grapple with some of these ideas. So again, this adaptability and flexibility is one of the key elements of the program. A slightly different aspect of the materials that have been created as part of this project is the set of reteach slides. The reteach slides are a very short deck. So here, this is 12 slides, and it includes 3 slides that are just the header and footer and the learning intention slide. They can be used wherever you like. So the idea behind the reteach slides is that there might have been something that you've noticed in some of your retrieval practice and your rehearsal where you think, gee, but I thought my students had some of this particular skill under control. I think we just need something that runs for 5 or 10 minutes just as a bit of a refresher. Or it might be that you have a small group of students that are working together in a tier 2 group, and you might think, gee, this is a perfect time for us just to have a little bit more practice on some of the early work in integers while the other students in the class are doing some independent practice. Or it could be set for individual students who are working with an adult or sometimes independently. You know, some schools are using them as homework for particular students, setting them reteach elements. So they always follow the main lessons, and there's usually a delay between when the main lesson is taught and the reteach. It can be used for top up or need identified during daily review. So that's the function of the reteach elements. Then we have the daily review. The daily review, what it is an opportunity for students to practice skills over the course of weeks, months, and years. So what we've done is we've taken each of the learning intentions from the lessons that we've developed in association with these fantastic teachers, and we've set out a schedule in which we provide opportunities for students to practice those skills. And there's multiple review periods. So things that have been taught, say, in week 2 of term 1, we've got opportunities for them to practice in week 4 of that term, and then they'll practice again at the start of term 2, and then again in term 3. So we're getting these multiple exposures so that students have the opportunity to practice and maintain their fluency with these mathematical concepts. The daily review decks themselves, they're intended to go for 5 to 10 minutes, super snappy. If you think your daily reviews are fast enough, you probably need to go a little bit more quickly. They shouldn't run for any more than 10 minutes. 10 minutes is your outside region for the length of time you spend on this. They come as slide decks that are intended to be used for whole class instruction. As I said, they're sequenced over time. We've thought carefully about how the mix of different ideas could be sequenced over time, and really they're about this retrieval and fluency of ideas. The daily review resources come in 2 parts. We've got lesson level decks, which is a set of slides that are suggested for a particular lesson, so you can choose to use those as they are. Or we also provide what we call master decks, which is basically just all of the slides from all the daily reviews for you to pick and choose as you see fit. So knowing the kids in your class, if you feel they need some more practice at a particular skill, then those daily review master decks exist for you to take elements and integrate into your daily reviews. So I said the daily review can be used as a standalone resource to complement existing scope and sequences, or in conjunction with the full lesson resources. We know for a number of schools, the daily review is the first thing they try, just trying that at the start of their normal lessons or the way that they normally work, just as an intro to some of these ideas. They are created alongside the lessons by the teachers who are creating the lessons, and just noting that we've got some topics that are not available until later terms once we've developed those lessons. The last component of those lesson level resources are a series of sample assessments. The sample assessments really are designed to evaluate Year 7 and Year 8 students' proficiency and mastery in some of these mathematical domains. They are samples of how teachers can design and structure their assessments in these styles for other units. So we've thought carefully about how we might be able to make some of the decisions around the assessments as explicit and visible as possible. So the teacher versions of the assessments feature like a director's commentary, if you like, about the assessment, why the questions were designed in the way that they are, the sorts of things you might look out for as a teacher, because they're there both to be used as is, but also to provide some samples and models if you chose to write some of your own assessments. We provide 3 diverse assessments per term across year 7 and 8. So you can find 3 of them available now. We'll be releasing another 3 assessments in term 2, and then 3 for each of the following terms after that. So the 3 types of assessments that we're working with is a traditional style test, so the ways that they can be arranged to most effectively get some information about your students' progress. We have some investigation tasks where students investigate particular mathematical ideas, and then strategic problem-solving tasks, which involve a deeper engagement with some of the underlying concepts and themes. So as I said, there's a student version. So this is a traditional test version. It just looks similar to a normal assessment. And then in the teacher copy, we've got this commentary. So some of it is talking directly to the teacher about how the assessment might be used. And then we've got other that are aspects that are more item specific. So what is it that we have thought about when we put together these particular questions? What information might you gain from the answers that are given for these questions themselves? So these assessments are there for you to use or not use as you see fit. The last little section, and this is, as you can imagine, that this is a large group of resources that are available for you to use, that have been generously made available by the National Catholic Education Commission, the intervention materials. The intervention materials are comprised of screening assessments, which are short tests designed to pick up potential difficulties in mathematics. Some precedence diagrams which show you as a teacher where you might go for some additional support for students who are not as numerate as we would hope them to be moving into year 7 or 8. And also some specialised daily review materials that you can use to help supplement your classroom practice. So the screening assessments, as I said, they identify students who might require additional support. They are pen and paper assessments. They can be used by classroom teachers with all of your students in the class or in small groups. That's up to you. And they connect to the other intervention support resources. So those screening assessments come as a slide pack. So it's ways of being able to represent some of that information to a whole class simultaneously. And it's a timed assessment. So those questions are available to the students for a certain amount of time. And then we've got an answer sheet that the students write their answers and some of their workings on as you move through the screener. We also provide some more information about the screener itself and how it should be administered, and use it in our screener information sheet available on the OCHR website. Along with that screener, we have some precedence diagrams that link backwards into some of the materials that we've created as part of OCHR's partnership with Catholic Education Canberra Goulburn, which are some of the years 5 and 6 lesson materials. They just provide some options for you if you identify particular areas of weakness in the students' mathematics or some areas that they might need some additional practice. Here's some other grist for the mill that you might choose to use or not use depending on the students in your care. They just assist with your plan, and they help ensure a targeted approach because it enables you to see which units and learning intentions help build the solid foundation so you can see the progression of ideas over time. We also provide some daily review additional support materials. So we provide large topic decks that feature mathematical fluency and retrieval practice on concepts that have been taught in primary school from years 2 through to year 6, so that you can easily find some materials that are going to be suitable for students, even when they're years behind some of the other students in terms of their current achievement. So really what we're trying to do there is provide some additional support. And I'm extremely conscious of the time, but I just wanted to re-emphasize this idea of adaptability. So the starting point always when we're designing a program that's suitable for your school or for your particular class is we always go back to the curriculum or the syllabus. It's really important that we're engaging with that documentation because it's describing what it is that we as teachers need to be aware of and need to be doing, and that includes for the New South Wales syllabus, the teaching notes and the teaching guidance that sits within. So that's always a starting point. But ultimately, teachers know their classes and their students the best. So all of these materials that I've been talking about, they're optional and they're adaptable. So I just want to take just a minute or two to describe the ways in which the different levels of materials can be adapted and have been adapted. So at the curriculum map level, we have seen schools adjusting the units themselves. So they might adjust the order in which those units appear, how long they go for, either building them out so that they go for a little bit longer because their students need more support, or chopping them down a bit and integrating them with other units. That's up to you. Some schools are choosing to implement different numbers of units, so not using all of the units. They may just choose one where they don't currently feel confident in the resourcing that they have in that particular area in their school. And you can choose from units, or you can just choose from individual lessons. So you don't have to use all of the lessons in a unit. You can just take the parts that you need. If you're missing something on a key content point or key element of the Australian or Victorian curriculum, then you can just pop in there and find the bit that you need that might be suitable for your class. In terms of the lesson materials, they can be used as a collective or they can be used independently. So you might choose to select particular elements. You might start with the daily review, which we know some schools are doing. You might choose to have the reteachers available somewhere, either through the OCHA website or somewhere centrally for your school for people to pick up. You might use sections of the booklets, just taking some of the tasks and activities for use in your particular classroom. You can use those materials in different ways. The main lesson, you can skip, edit, or add slides. You don't have to do everything. We've designed it, and the teachers who created these lesson materials have created them in such a way that we think that they are coherent and work well together, but you know your class best. You can take sections that you like of the slide. You can replace sections of slides with bits that you know work for your class. You can skip some slides. You can say, this bit's taking too long. I'm just going to get rid of this section. So please, the lesson materials set as grist for your work as teachers and to support you. You can move through that main lesson at a pace that suits your students, and the role of that checking for understanding to get a feel for where your students are at and what they currently know, understand and can do is really important for that, because you'll be able to moderate. If your students have mastered a concept in your opinion from the information that you're getting back, well, then don't do another 10 rehearsals of it and instead move to independent practice or ratchet up the difficulty level. And as I said, you can select parts of lessons, or you can supplement existing lessons with materials that you and your schools already have. Now, before I maybe address any questions that might be popping up through the chat, and feel free to pop any questions that you have into the chat or reflections if you've used the materials so far into the chat. I thought I'd just quickly run through some questions that maybe have come up a few times before. The first one is around differentiation. So there's a couple of different ways in which you as a teacher might use the materials to differentiate for your class. The first is through the use of difficulty gauges. So helping students to select learning activities that are going to be suitable for them. Some schools ask students to start at the easy level of the difficulty gauges and move through. Some ask students to select. Some have teachers who select particular activities for particular students. But there's also a range of different scaffolds and supports that exist within some of the activities and the tasks that you can choose to provide to some of your students who require that, or just leave it more open-ended for students who you think would enjoy that process. Open-ended tasks offer the opportunity for students to explore mathematics at different levels. We have those reteach decks that can be used for students who require some additional support and rehearsal. We've also seen some schools have decided that they might use them just as some of the Year 8 reteachers, just to give a little bit of extension for some of their students who they feel are ready for the next concept but don't need to use an entire lesson. And of course, all the resources are adaptable, so you can take your own copy and change and edit whatever you like, and that's fine. And there's also the use of the assessment that's built into both the lessons and outside of the lessons, the assessment materials. So in terms of the assessment that we're providing as part of this project, first of all, there's formative assessment that's embedded into the resources. So we've got suggested checks for understanding and places where you might pause just to get some information from where students are at different points in the lesson. You can take the resources that have been provided and integrate into your current future assessment program. We know some schools are using parts of the daily review as like mini assessments. They're just putting little slide decks together to use as just do now activities that just give them a little bit of information, maybe on a Friday lesson that they might just check in and see where students are at every couple of weeks. And of course, the sample assessments exist for your use as either model or to use as intended. That's it on this whirlwind tour. As you can imagine, there's a lot of fantastic work that's gone into the creation that supports for you, and that the expert teachers that we've been working with, we're so grateful for them sharing their knowledge and expertise, and also just taking on this responsibility of sharing things that they know with their colleagues. So just invite people, if there are things that you would like to ask. I'm conscious it's 4:51, so if you need to go, you can head off. But if there's something you'd like to ask, I might take one or two questions before we finish up today. Well, folks, thank you so much for your attendance tonight. As I said, a recording of either this session or Tuesday night will be made available through the website. If you can also contact us through the contact at Ochre just for more information or elements of the slide deck. So thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic and safe evening, and we hopefully will see you later.